And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson. You see the sirens in your feed. You know the news is breaking, so we're here with an emergency podcast. Yes, we have Jeremy Pruitt out at Tennessee, but that's not all. Athletic Director Phil Fulmer will be retiring, which means, once again, we're back where we were. We need an athletic director, and we need a head football coach for the Tennessee Volunteers, and the program that has been chasing the success of 1998 ever since, that continues to trip over itself. A lot to get to here, including the investigation, which allowed Tennessee to make this decision to fire with cause. We've got what's next for Jeremy Pruitt, what happens to this Tennessee program, and of course, sort of painting the path forward for the Volunteers here in the next couple of weeks. Bud, I'll throw it to you first, because there have been like Wes Rucker on the 24/7 Sports Network. He was on CBS Sports HQ just a minute ago before me. I was listening to him. You could tell that there was some factions within the Knoxville community that had a desire to move on from Jeremy Pruitt one way or another. Jeremy Pruitt had his supporters as well. But as you try to look into what was happening behind the scenes around this Tennessee football program, are you leaning on the investigation side of things or on the on-field performance side of things into what really probably ended up getting Jeremy Pruitt ousted as head coach of the Vols?
I mean, I don't think you can separate the two,
okay,
personally, right? I mean, you don't bring in those investigators in that law firm if you're trying to see Jeremy Pruitt succeed, right? The way you succeed is by looking the other way for those things that are alleged to have happened. Like, that's how you win at the highest levels. You bring them in because you want to find dirt to get him to agree to leave with a zero or very low dollar buyout so that you can go make another coaching change. Like, things weren't going in the right direction. Jeremy Pruitt as a head coach was just, he was a head coach who was still a defensive coordinator. His offenses were just pathetic. And it was just, hey, let's run the ball first, second down every time. And Jarrett Garantano, please bail us out on 3rd and 7. Again, kind of Will Muschamp. Luckily, Kirby Smart for the Dogs is I know it's the dog podcast, has kind of, kind of gone beyond that now. But I think that these are 100% related. Let's just call it for what it is. Tennessee was trying to find dirt so they didn't have to pay Pruitt.
Yeah, in the best way. I mean, I think it's kind that they're allowing Phil Fulmer to retire, which I think we're all seeing kind of past that one, seeing as how Fulmer is the one who kind of led the original coup and then brought in Pruitt as his guy. And then now that Pruitt's gone, and now, Fulmer's just like, you know what? Hey, while we're at it, I think I've had enough of working. I'm just going to stop. So yeah, it's Tennessee, and Bud's 1,000,000% right. This was, they've done all this because somebody decided that they wanted to move on. And it was like, oh crap, Fulmer just gave him a contract extension a couple months ago. And what's the buyout was like, what, 12 million on that thing at this point? And it was just like, all right, well, we need to do what we need to do in order to mitigate that buyout as much as possible. Because, like, let's be real, like, when was the last time we saw a head coach fired because of recruiting violations?
Oh, it's a throwback. I mean? Yeah, no, this is a throwback scandal. This is from another era. Yeah. Like the scandals, and I want to make sure that I don't speak out of term here, but like the scandals that we've seen hit on a much deeper and more human level in terms of like societal and like within the infrastructure of the university, like things that do need to be rooted out. Impermissible benefits? Are you kidding me? We haven't seen impermissible bennies as a reason to get rid of a head coach since Chip Kelly was at Oregon. Like, and that wasn't the reason that he left, obviously, but he did get hit with a show cause because he paid $25,000 for some poorly arranged notes.
With a check. Remember? Like, that was the thing. It was like all the SEC people were like, wait, you paid with a check?
Yeah, you didn't even do it well. And
Pac-12 was still figuring these things out. They were just dipping their toes in the water. Like, Oregon was finally becoming a college football power, and they were still learning how to go about such things.
Yeah, Michael Glazier, as you mentioned, when he shows up to your campus, you're torched. Like, you're trying to mitigate things. You're trying to prepare for either lowering a buyout or arranging some kind of negotiation with the NCAA to try and get lesser penalties. The fact that things turned so quickly on Jeremy Pruitt after being tapped as Phil Fulmer's choice, because we need to remind people, John Currie, current Wake Forest athletic director, had Mike Leach ready to go. And then Phil Fulmer's like, And whether or not Mike Leach, and like, that's even aside from the Schiano stuff, right? Or was John Currie Schiano too?
Curry was Schiano too, I think. I mean, because Leach was after the Schiano thing. I see. This is the part of the Tennessee coaching search that's so confusing. I can't remember what order it was, but I think Schiano was first. Then there was like the stop the Schiano protests, and that became all right. Well, we need to bring in somebody. And like, because I remember thinking at the time, like the fact that they were getting Leach after going through all this seemed like a pretty good move. And then I think that's when Fulmer came in. But my memory could be wrong because there was a lot going on in that coaching search at the time.
I think Tom's right. Like they had the reject Schiano thing, and then they went after, like, John Currie was off trying to get Leach as Fulmer was staging the coup, and let's bring Tennessee home to a Tennessee guy.
And now here we are, and Phil Fulmer puts his entire reputation as an athletic director on the line for I like the way you mentioned it. He is a SEC defensive coordinator who happened to have head coach in his title. A very well-paid SEC defensive coordinator. And the Volunteers had good defenses, but they had a losing record, 3-7 this season. What is the path moving forward? And do you all think that it involves Kevin Steele, who, and again, in the Palace intrigue in this is fantastic. We find out that Tennessee is on a hiring freeze in the midst of the investigation. We're not going to renew the contract of T. Martin or Brian Niedermeyer, until we finish everything. We got to tie up all of our loose ends. Then a few days ago, they say, and we are hiring Kevin Steele. We are breaking our hiring freeze to hire the guy who reportedly was in the midst of trying to get his boss fired to get that job over at Auburn. Is Kevin Steele a realistic candidate to be the head coach of Tennessee for the start of 2021?
Coup recognized coup.
Yeah. I would bet a lot of money that Kevin Steele is going to be the head coach of Tennessee to start next season. I don't know if it'll be full time yet or if he'll still have the interim title, but I think that he was brought in for this exact purpose.
Yeah, I think they knew what they were doing. And you don't know how long this search is going to take because they don't have an AD yet. And then you don't know how long the search is really going to take because when that AD gets usurped by somebody else who then gets put in as AD, like, it could take even longer. We could get a lot of content out of this, guys. I'm pretty excited.
What's the all right, National Signing Day ahead in a couple weeks, and Tennessee has a top 10 class. What are the what does that look like for what happens next? How many of those prospects are going to be released? And what's the roster turnover going to look like here in the next couple weeks?
Well, I thought I already saw the top recruit in their class kind of gave the deuces on Twitter, didn't he?
I believe that was their 22 kid.
Oh, okay.
For the next cycle. So Tennessee has already signed 19 of their commitments. They only have 2 kids who are committed but unsigned in Rock Taylor and Colby Smith. We'll see what happens with those guys. They did get Hendon Hooker to transfer from the Hokies. We'll see if
Bryant too.
Right.
Yeah, but Big Cat's there for Steele.
Wande Morris announced that he's transferring out. That Tennessee is losing a lot of guys to the portal. This is not really a quick fix job in my opinion. And we'll have to see how many of their kids want to be let out of their letter of intent. I wrote this when Texas fired Tom Herman post signing day. I'm a firm believer. At the very least, if the head coach you signed with gets fired before you enroll, you should be allowed out of your letter of intent and be allowed to sign with another school, or at least have the option to do so. You could always return to your school you signed with first if that happens. But I have these coaches saying, "Oh, just use the transfer portal, use your free transfer." I'm like, yeah, but to me, that's not an appropriate remedy for schools pulling what effectively amounts to a bait and switch on you, right? You should use your transfer portal one-time waiver when you get to a place and figure out it's not for you.
And they don't even have that waiver yet anyway. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's
right.
Yeah, no, I agree. If the coach is, even if the coach just leaves on his own, I still think that anytime there's a coaching change, especially after signing day and players have committed, they should be out of it. And I just think that should be boilerplate standard practice for every single school.
We are starting to see that a little bit more because players are realizing they have a little more power on social media. If you recall, like the Brew McCoy situation there with UNC at Texas a couple of years ago, you're seeing a little bit more. Back when Baylor fired Art Briles, you had Baylor try to stall for a while and they weren't going to let the kids out, and then the kind of the PR for that was really pretty bad. And Baylor's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna reconsider a little bit of this. So
what do you think's next for Jeremy Pruitt?
Did what's his name go to Texas yet? I know he's top candidate allegedly.
Pete Golding.
Oh yeah.
Oh, just bring him back to Alabama.
There we go. Boom.
the Nick Saban coaching rehabilitation center is just very ready to welcome Jeremy Pruitt in, somebody who worked as a defensive backs coach, defensive coordinator for a very long time and came up through the ranks because Saban loses, and this is like, we'll have some of this packaged into later shows too, but I mean, Charles Huff is gone, right? You lose Jeff Banks. You lose Kyle Flood. You lose Steve Sarkisian, Butch Jones. Am I missing anybody else that's significant either as a position coach or as an analyst? I mean, I think it was almost a half dozen members of the national championship winning staff are out, leaving Saban with a lot of hires for pretty good job. But I don't know. That's a pretty nice landing spot. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the buyout. Like you mentioned, he could fight this in court and get a low dollar, right?
Mm-hmm.
$0. Then he could contest it. They could end up settling out of court. Shout out to billable hours as always. But to land back at Alabama, especially if you're able to get a position coach job with a decent salary, it's not a bad way for Jeremy Pruitt to be able to get out of Knoxville.
Yeah, I think Alabama makes a ton of sense for him if that spot comes open, because it's like, especially, it makes sense for both sides. A, because Pruitt's going to need a job, and B, Saban's going to be like, all right, well, I already know how this is going to work, so it's a good fit for him, and I think that makes the most sense. And I think as far as Saban having to replace all those assistants, I mean, that's just kind of becoming standard operating procedure for him, isn't it?
Some of those felt like Jeff Banks and Charles Huff felt significant for the recruiting side of things. I mean, Bud, am I wrong about that?
No, those guys are really good recruiters. I would note that I think the hire of Jeff Stoutland to come back as the offensive line coach. Remember, he was actually hired away by the Philadelphia Eagles after he put together that awesome 2012 offensive line for the Tide. And so then didn't Cristobal replace him, I think? And then
if that was 2012, then yeah, I think that was Cristobal after that.
Yeah, I think Stoutland was there 2012. I think he's a very good offensive line coach and a good recruiter as well. So that's a good replacement in my opinion for losing Kyle Flood, who did an awesome job, albeit with awesome players. But yeah, a lot of guys for Bama to replace.
Knoxville is unique. I like Knoxville. I think going to Neyland Stadium is a cool experience. Going out, seeing the Vol Navy, seeing a fan base that has packed that stadium out despite 12 years of mediocrity. It's impressive. Like, there are some of those places around the country where even though the on-field results haven't been there, even though you haven't been competing for SEC championships, you are still seeing a real passion around there. Tennessee has pretty good facilities. I'm not good at the facility power ranking and sort of judging it, but there seems to be a lot of investment. There also seems to be a lot of dysfunction. How do y'all view this Tennessee job? I mean, if we think that there's a chance that Kevin Steele might be the head coach, might be a stopgap Band-Aid, a little bit of a bridge, what about the bigger picture in the future? Like, what is the ceiling for Tennessee under the right coach, and how long is it going to take to get there?
Do you remember, like, when Matt Rule took the Baylor job, how he wouldn't do it without a 7-year contract?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm taking the Tennessee job, I want a 7-year contract, because I feel like that's a spot where I think you can still win. I think some of it is still overstated and kind of stuck in 1998, thinking that's really easy to replicate. You just need to get the right coach. And I think that's all true to a degree, but I've just reached the point where this program where I think that you need somebody to come in there and just like completely tear that thing from the ground up and rebuild it. Like, this isn't like a quick move in fixer upper to me. I feel like you've got to tear this thing down to the foundation and start over. And whoever you bring in, you need to give them the time to do it. And like you said, the quote unquote warring factions within that athletic department, if that's even real or if that's just kind of the way we look at it from the outside, everybody needs to be on the same page. Everybody needs to be pulling the rope in the same direction. So I think you need to find a coach that can do that and be that kind of leader. But then I also think that you need to give that coach the time to do it and really rebuild that program, because I think that Tennessee has spent too much time just trying to, put a new coat of paint on it, hoping that it'll fix it. And I don't think that's going to work.
I agree with Tom. I think this is a good job, mainly because you are going to get rich. But you're probably going to get – I'm serious. Like, that's the number one aspect of this job. It's like not a top six job in the SEC.
You call a job a one-contract job before.
Yeah.
Is Tennessee a one-contract job?
Tennessee's had 6 head coaches in the last 13 years. You tell me, right? I mean, guys, by the way, like, it's not I kind of disagree with Tom as far as ability to win. I think you can win, but I don't know if it is quite as easy to win at the level that Tennessee fans and Tennessee boosters and admin believe you can. They have 2 conference titles in the last 30 years. And they were back-to-back on some really loaded teams in 97, 98. 2. That's not a job that screams, hey, we just get the right guy in here, we're going to be winning the SEC. It's not. It's hard to win there. North Carolina and Clemson are up as far as other teams within your region that do a good job of poaching your players. Some of the guys that Tennessee used to get out of California, like in the Fresno area, Oklahoma now does a really good job of dipping in there and getting, as well as some of the schools in Texas. I wrote it on my little yellow pad here. I'm going to read off a list of schools that I think are either as good or better jobs. And let me know how many you disagree with. Bama, LSU, A&M, Auburn, Georgia, UF.
Okay.
That's
best job.
An easy 6 in the SEC. I kind of think it's like 7th to 9th best in the SEC. USC and Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Virginia Tech, Louisville. I think there's some question in there, but you're going to get
Louisville,
paid.
I think you're getting on the same level.
Okay. And North Carolina. Same pay, reasonable expectations, same access to talent. Texas, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And probably Wisconsin, because I don't think you're going to win a national title either, but you can coach for a long time at Wisconsin. You actually raise your kids there in Madison as opposed to, what are you going to rent a condo in Knoxville?
You can have
you
can have your first kid in Madison and then coach that same kid in Madison.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think Tennessee is somewhere between like the 15th and 25th best job in the country, somewhere in that range.
All right, so if it's the 15th to 25th best job, if it's the 15th to 25th best program, it should be winning more. It's almost like a better job than it is a program.
Yeah. I agree.
Geez.
That's why I'm saying that's what I mean when I say this is a complete and total tear it down and rebuild it and give the coach that you do hire support and time, and don't 2 years into it or after the first rough stretch start digging through dirt looking for anything so you can move on and bring in somebody else.
How much leverage is Billy Napier going to have in turning down this job? Like, think about all the other jobs he's already turned down. Like, this is just,
I mean, he must be getting everything he wants from like a university investment standpoint, right? Like, if he's going to go and talk to South Carolina, and if he's going to go and he's going to talk to Auburn, and Tennessee's going to want to talk and he's going to turn them down, then he's just getting like whatever like Nick Saban puts in place, what Dabo puts in place, that whole thing where it's like, we need to be moving together. That is what I want to see. And these are the things I want, and I want you to fulfill them. And I don't know what that list looks like. I'm not in those conversations, but I have heard enough coaches talk about when they have that with everyone moving together, university administrators, athletic department, from the AD all the way down, the boosters, when everybody's on the same page, you can get some stuff done. And I kind of feel like that's probably what Billy Napier is asking. And he still is not hearing that he's going to get that kind of commitment. And he probably won't get that kind of commitment from Tennessee, especially where it's at right now. Right.
No, if I'm Billy Napier, Tennessee's not the job I want.
No, I'm waiting out a job in my own state.
Mm-hmm.
In Louisiana or
right.
Okay. Ooh.
Give me another year or two.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez. You get Icarus, man. That 2019 team. Just fly that close, man. All right. So as we start to move things forward, this is just awesome. Bruce Feldman reporting that Peyton Manning will play a quote big role in the next hire.
Yes.
Content.
I mean, I get it, but why? You know what I mean? It's like, I understand that he's Peyton Manning and he is really the greatest player in your program history and he's the biggest name, but what does Peyton Manning know about coaching hires? Like,
what?
You know who Peyton Manning's nephew is?
Who?
Arch Manning.
Oh, so
potential number 1 overall player in his class. Tennessee gets things turned around a little bit. Who else do you trust but the guy hand selected by your Hall of Fame uncle? I mean, there's levels to this thing.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, so
David Cutcliffe is going to leave Duke for Tennessee, is what you're telling me.
I don't think that's how this ends. I'm pretty sure. And then we've got a long road ahead of us. Like you mentioned, Bud, that's this is going to be a content machine right here. Tennessee always is. So we'll get together and we'll have our popcorn as we see things begin to unfold. Any final thoughts either on Tennessee or the search, Jeremy Pruitt, before we get out of here?
Well, here's a question I have for both of you. I'm assuming Kevin Steele is going to be the guy. If not Steele, who do you think the ideal candidate for this job is?
Hugh Freeze. I mean, you have to eat it in terms of in the middle of NCAA issues, bring in somebody who has NCAA violations and scandal on his track record, but he wants it, right? I mean, doesn't Hugh?
Yeah, for sure he wants it. I don't think
Freeze would say yes. And I think that you just dive all in and you say, you know what, we're selling our soul. We're going to bring in Hugh Freeze and he's going to score some touchdowns.
I think Hugh Freeze would be the guy if you didn't just fire this dude. I mean, we're going to wait to see what Tennessee says for the reasons they fired him, because that press conference is at 3:00. But I think we all understand what went down here. If it wasn't for that reason, I think Freeze makes a heck of a lot of sense for the gig. But there is that reason. I think you probably got to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
Jamie Chadwell?
See, I think Dave Clawson would be great for Tennessee. I don't think he's even on the radar. I don't think he'd be acceptable to the fan base as the hire, but I think Dave Clawson would be great.
Yeah,
I think he's exactly what they need.
Yeah, it was the OC there for like just maybe 1 or 2 seasons, but I think it was at the end of Fulmer's run right before he got pushed out. So he's associated with all these teams that are falling short of expectations, but that was a long time ago. I mean, 15, 16 years ago. We've seen shorter memories from fan bases, right?
I just feel like he's the type of coach they need to just fix things and at least get going in a good direction.
I don't have any doubt that he would do well there. For the most part, I think he's a really good coach. We see him every week in the ACC, really out coaching guys who have more talent than he does. You can get players at Tennessee, but yet you're also going to be how many teams on your schedule on an annual basis? Georgia, Florida. They are unfortunately, they're unfortunate enough to draw Bama as their yearly opponent in the cross-division rival. And so that's 3 games right off the top that you're going to have the talent disadvantage with on a yearly basis, and maybe a couple more. The ability to outcoach teams that have more talent than you is important. Do you take another swing at John Gruden, though? I'm really hoping that they do, because this is just every time. It is amazing.
Groomers. I would do it for the content. Yeah. I don't, good luck pulling him away from that contract.
Yeah. I mean, does he want to do it? I mean, is he unhappy with the Raiders?
No. He's making what is his deal?
$100 million contract.
Okay. Oh man.
Dundee might be interesting, by the way. Like if he's finally had enough in Stillwater.
That would be an incredible exit for him because he's had 1 or 2 flirtations with Tennessee, right?
At least one.
Yeah, that would be incredible. Well, we'll obviously be dialed into it, and the content won't stop because Tennessee gives it to us every single time. It might be between the 15th and 25th best job. Might not be a top 25 program in terms of success. Top 5 in terms of giving us stuff to talk about. You can follow him on Twitter at BudElliott3. You can follow him at Tom Fornelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.